So, welcome everybody to episode 6 of the White Shark Interest Group podcast. We are Facebook's largest white shark specific group. Currently, at time of recording, we are just shy of 47,000 members. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're not a member, and I know that's some of you out there, please get over to Facebook, just search the White Shark Interest Group, hit the join button, and you'll be asked a question about why you want to join. And if it's just because you heard the podcast, please tell us and give us a shout out there. Educate, conserve, and protect. We like to share discussion, debate, as well as the pictures and videos that I know a lot of people come to see around what we love, which is great white shark. So we've got something a little bit different for you today. We've got another guest episode, and I have an absolute treat for you because I am super stoked to welcome very good friend, the amazing Mr. Brandon Kilbride, to the show.
Good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be on the show. Thanks very much for hosting me, Ricardo.
I've been itching to get you on here, to be honest, Brandon. Just a little background for folks who may not have seen him, and I'm not going to do a shameless plug for the film I made because I do that every week. Brandon, I met when I went out as a tourist with my wife to South Africa, and Brandon was working out as a dive master on Rob Lawrence's boat out in False Bay in South Africa. Goes without saying, was an amazing time, but bizarrely, we've ended up living about an hour away from each other in the UK, which still blows my mind. He's a photographer, he's a surfer, he's a dive master. He's been around surfing and sharks, fair to say, all your life, Brandon?
Yeah, pretty much. I've been involved in the sea since I was, I think, 5 years old. Was the first time I picked up a surfboard down at Muizenberg Beach. I think it's quite famous today with regards to white shark spottings. There seems to be sort of a bit of a highway for them, off the coast. I suppose it's probably part of their migration patterns during the summertime. And yeah, it means surfing, paddle skiing, life-saving, diving. Probably I'd say for the last 32 years of my life in False Bay. It's been great.
You told me a great story that still makes me laugh when I hear it about how when you were in school and you kind of bunked out of school to go surfing at the beach. And
I was in, I think it's grade 1 is what you call it here in the UK. I think I was 6 years old, and I asked my teacher at the time if I could please go to the bathroom, and she said, yeah, no problem, that's fine. And what I did was I actually took we used to hang our school bags on hooks outside the classroom during those days. And I quickly took my bag off the thing, and I didn't go to the bathroom. I jumped on my bicycle and I went and I visited Muizenberg Beach with a few friends, and we had a surf. But I did get caught. And the mother quickly evacuated me back to the house, back into my uniform, and I was back in the classroom very quickly.
What a way to bunk off, though. Come on, man. I'm bunking off to go surf on the beach at like 6 years old. Yeah, that is too cool for school.
It's probably not a safe thing to do nowadays, but in those days, it was classed as a cool thing to do, I suppose.
Well, from a guy who grew up, in sort of Canada and the UK, where we bunked off to go and, I don't know, hang around the shops and, cause trouble, I think surfing's a healthier way of doing it for sure. So, that's what I wanted to talk to you about today and why I wanted to get you on the show. I'd love to talk to you about a million things around sharks, but I want to talk to you specifically about surfing and surfing with sharks. We have tons of surfers on the group. In fact, only today, one of the members who requested to join put in just said, normally people say, like, I'm a surfer. I just want to understand what's out there with me. I want to know more about sharks. I want to educate myself. So being a surfer, what's it like being a surfer out there on the water, especially somewhere like South Africa, where that there are great white sharks around you? There have to be great white sharks there. What's that like?
From a person who loves the ocean and takes pride and passion for what they get out of being in the sea. Surfers, I think majority of us know the inherent risks that they take when they're going into the sea. They know that there's predators out there, that, there's potentially the risk of being, a victim to a shark attack. But 99.9% of the time, those sharks are not there to hunt or to attack human beings. They're purely there doing their daily thing, looking for seals, migration patterns. It's always mistaken identity, I would say, when it comes to a shark attack. If you look at a surfer sitting on a surfboard, he's got two legs, hanging over. He's got his hands splashing in the water. It's very much making very similar movements to what a seal would be doing, So we all know those inherent risks, and we take those risks because we know it's probably the best way of clearing one's head if you've had a tough day at work, or if it's a great way to start the weekend, get up early, go for a surf. It's like my playground basically at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Even if there's no waves, just to be in the sea, get the salt water over my head. It's just it's an amazing way for someone to spend their quality time in the ocean if they want to.
But at that point, let's say you're at Musenberg
Yeah.
Beach. I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, you got the shark spotter flags there, which I want to
Yeah.
talk about the shark spotter thing today as well. At that point, you've had the the crappy day at work. You're stressed out. I'm going to go for a surf, and you get out there and you got your suit on, you got your board ready. At any point in that process, getting into the water, does it enter into your head? And I better watch out for sharks today.
Personally, I've never had a worry, looking out for sharks, because I believe that there's a thing in the surfing community. It's called safety in numbers.
Hmm.
So when you're out there, you've sometimes got two, three, 400 people in the water. So your chances of being attacked by a shark is very, very slim. So I don't even think about it. I just think about just getting out there, hey, maybe meeting one or two of my friends, and then just looking for that perfect ride.
Yeah.
And it's generally always the first wave of your session that determines how good a session you're going to have.
Okay.
For me, if I have a really, really good wave, it just makes me more stoked, more amped, more excited to just, go out there and not even think about sharks. I know they're there, but
Sure.
like I said earlier, it's the ocean is my playground, and I love just being, in it.
Well, one of the things that we've talked about before, and we've talked about on this group as well, is the whole fear of sharks and why we fear sharks. Compared to say land-based predators.
Yeah.
I grew up with until I came out to South Africa to dive with sharks. I had a horrendous fear of water,
Yeah.
especially the sea. It wasn't the sharks so much; it was just the vastness of the ocean.
Mm.
You're a different breed if you see the vast ocean and your first thought is, "Hey, I want to get in there. I want to get my board. I want to go in." But I've seen like footage of you, which we even put in the film, where you're just out there by yourself sometimes, or with a few other people.
Mm.
Let's say it's at sunrise or sunset,
Yeah.
and it's just you and you're sort of in the water next to your board.
Yeah.
Are you telling me, like, you really don't entertain the idea at that point of, "Hey, something could be around me right now"?
In the earlier days, when I first started surfing, I mean, I'm talking now in the late 80s, I picked up my first surfboard. When you're that young, there's definitely there's not inclined to think about sharks or shark attacks or anything like that.
Yeah.
Over time, since I would say the early 2000s, probably since 2001, white sharks in particular have started making a more visible appearance of themselves inshore.
Okay.
I always believe they've been there. People are now looking out for them a lot more. So obviously the media is attracted to this, and they tend to blow things up. So now people are becoming more aware that sharks are there. They're becoming a lot more sort of they need to be on the lookout. There was one or two shark attacks, it puts everybody on edge.
Yeah.
Definitely one or two surf spots around Cape Town, in particularly where there aren't any shark spotters, which does give you a little bit of, makes your hair stand up sometimes. You might be sitting out there and you think, oof, you feel this, maybe your feet moving, and you see the swirl come up next to you, and
Yeah.
it definitely does pass or go through your mind. But then again, it's the risk that you're prepared to take to be in the ocean. As for surfing at Musenberg or Cork Bay or any of the locations along the coast where there's shark spotters, I generally feel quite relaxed because I know there's someone always watching out over us.
Yeah, I should explain to people who may not be aware of it what the Shark Spotters sort of program is. I guess in South Africa, around the areas that Brandon's talking about there, around sort of Musenberg, Hope Bay, and around Cape Town area, you've got the topography of the mountains overlooking the sea pretty much everywhere. So basically, the Shark Spotters program as it is now is that it'll be a combination of guys up on the mountains watching out in the sea and looking at distance for presence of sharks. And then when they are spotted, I believe it's then obviously raising the flag system to alert people. So you're going to get different levels. I mean, can you just explain what you're looking for as a surfer? You hit the beach, you're looking at the flags. What is it you're looking for?
The shark spotting program, I think I would class as a real game changer, particularly along that False Bay coast. It was initiated and started in 2004 by a guy called Greg Burtish. At that time, it wasn't it was a sort of a people from the public used to provide funds and used to work along with the local fishermen who would always be up on the mountain because they used to do the traditional trick, sort of seine per se netting.
Yeah.
They started to work purely with the fishermen. And then as it sort of gained momentum, companies started jumping on board and started providing funding, and that's when we were able to actually employ people, and that's when the flag system was introduced. So currently you've got the flag system, which would be a green flag, which means the water's crystal clear, really, really good visibility. Then you've got a black flag, which means the visibility is quite bad.
Yep.
Ideally, you don't want to go too far out, so it's sort of at your own risk. Then you've got a red flag, which means there's been a shark sighted in the last hour.
Yep.
And then you've got the black flag as well. And the black flag is, or should I say, a black and white flag is when there is a shark currently in the water. So it's a white flag with a black shark in the middle, which gets flown up, and that's your flag system. When you pitch up at the beach, you want to have a look at the flags.
Yep.
And majority of the time in Cape Town, because we have the traditional wind through summer is the southeaster, and that southeaster tends to make the water very sort of churned up. So you generally have quite bad
I know
visibility.
I've been in one of those winds. It nearly took my head off.
Tends to blow sometimes for up to 2 weeks at a time. So most of the time it's the black flag. But the guys which are on the mountain shark spotting, they are brilliant. They are ex fishermen generally, so they know exactly what to look out for, and they've got extremely, extremely good eyes. Like I put my life in their hands any day to go
Well,
surf.
I guess you are doing, aren't you?
That's exactly it. You're entering the water knowing that someone has got your back. But like I said in the beginning, the chances of being attacked by a shark is very, very slim. More people die in rip currents than shark attacks. So it's very low risk.
When you're out surfing, do you think about those other risks as well? Are you more focused on, how the waves are performing, the wind, again, the rocks and so on? Are you thinking about that more than sharks?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you're surfing a place like Cork Bay Reef, for instance, for me, it's more about your positioning to the reef and not about the sharks.
Yeah.
Because you're in the wrong place at the wrong time at Cork Bay Reef and you get caught on the inside, that reef is very, very shallow, and it can really give you a good old pounding, and you'll end up on the rocks. You can damage your back. I've known people there who have almost broken their necks.
Yeah.
In terms of that, when you're pitching up at different surf spots, yes, I definitely do take into account rip currents, where the rocks are. As somebody from the local area, you generally know what spot to go to on a particular wind, a particular swell size. Personally, for me, I tend to not even think about anything. I just want to get in the water and go surf and have fun. I think as soon as you put that fear into your head, before you even got into the water, start thinking about sharks, you're not going to have a good surf, because that's what you're going to be thinking about the whole time.
That makes more sense to me, I guess.
You just want to try and just forget about the whole this whole shark thing, because generally, like I said, you've got someone watching your back, you've got safety numbers, you've got your mates out there to talk and have fun. And the time where it does come across your mind where you do start thinking of sharks, when you're man alone
Yeah.
in a very sort of isolated area, such as a place called Noordhoek. There's a surf break down the beach, which is called the Dunes. The nearest accessibility for a car is about 2 miles or 3 kilometers away.
Wow.
So if someone does get bitten, and unfortunately someone did get attacked at that beach in 2003, I think it was, and he died within less than a minute. It was such a severe shark attack. There's not much hope if you get bitten badly down there, because purely it takes so long to go and get help.
Yeah.
That beach specifically is probably the one which plays in the back of my mind the most.
But again, there's really got to be some kind of mentality shift there that says, I'm going to trek, that length of distance out from where I can park my car to go surf. You really must be in like a surf zen moment to want to go ride those waves in that area.
That particular surf break, the Dunes, is a world class wave on its day in summertime when the swell is good and the southeaster is blowing, because it is mostly a summer wave. Because what happens, all the sand blows from the beach and it creates a bottom topography which is very similar to the waves which you'd get in Indonesia or the Mentawai Islands. It's these perfect cylindrical. It's a phenomenal wave.
I'd encourage anybody listening to this podcast, just even head over to YouTube and just check out some videos of that area, because
Yeah.
the waves there are spectacular, almost like glass in the right weather with the right light.
100%, but also saying that at the same time, it's a very, very challenging wave, a very heavy wave. And I certainly wouldn't recommend it for someone who's starting out, who's learning to surf. It's not a beginner wave. It's definitely more sort of upper intermediate to advanced. if you're going to go down there, go with your friends or experience an area, and know your limits.
And failing all else, do a Mick Fanning and punch the shark in the nose. I don't know
Uh,
if anyone saw that clip. I'll stick it in the comments below. But that famous incident, it was a televised surf event, wasn't it? It was televised competition, and the shark pops up next to Mick Fanning, and
yeah, that was
you take
unbelievable.
this
I,
pop.
I was
That's crazy.
I was actually watching that event live on
Oh,
the
you saw it live?
yeah, I
Wow.
was actually watching it live on the World Championship or the World Surf League. The incident actually happened at Jeffreys Bay, and once again, Jeffreys Bay, it's a point break, and those sharks are using that point as a navigational route. So they're coming inshore and they're sticking along the shelves of the rocks, and they're on their daily sort of patrol or migration patterns or but I think what happened, that animal came up to have a look at Mick and unfortunately got his mouth stuck in its leash.
Yeah.
He had all that commotion going on, and there was one stage where Mick got pulled under the water before the leash snapped,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and then the shark moved off. And I firmly believe, if sharks were targeting human beings as a prey item, that shark would have pushed through with that attack totally. But he came up, he got this funny plastic thing in his mouth, realized that
Yeah.
definitely not what he's after, and actually got a fright and moved off.
You'll know this obviously from working out on the boats out in False Bay, that particularly great whites, are lauded as this, massive apex predator, king of the oceans, and yet they're ridiculously cautious creatures. They will flee anything. I've seen them like be next to the cage and
Yeah.
and seen just like a pole go in the water, or somebody clinks the side of the boat in the wrong way or something, and they're off. They're not there to just pounce on you, are they? They're very cautious.
100%, 100%. These great whites, they, like you said, they're very cautious. They come up if they feel slightly threatened, or something's not aligning up for them, they'll move off. It even comes down to, like you said, like if you've a lot of people in the cage, and there's who are there to experience and understand and educate themselves about these sharks, that these sharks will come in, and then if they feel that there's too much movement in the cage, or people are moving their hands and feet about, they'll move off. And this is exactly why when you do go cage diving, that the operators will say to you, look, try and keep as still as possible, trying to make as minimal movement as possible. These sharks are totally aware of what's going on around them. As soon as they feel uneasy, they're going to move off. In today's times with cage diving, if you go cage diving, which I think a lot of people should do, because it's a fantastic experience, and you get to know how these sharks actually operate. They're not the man eaters.
I think that was one of the biggest surprises for myself and Rachel,
Mm.
having the fear when we first went out to see sharks.
Yeah,
I remember being on the boat the first day out, and you were there,
yeah,
and I remember you were pointing out like breaches happening in the distance,
yeah, yeah.
and I'm just like, "Oh," half of me was kinda like, "I hope he's kidding," because I came here to see sharks jump out of the water, but man, are sharks really jumping out of the water? So the fear was so strong, but within seconds and seeing one just rise out of the water slowly, the perception just changed. It just felt like I've been lied to about how these creatures are portrayed, and it's hard to get that across, though, to people who haven't been out there and done that, isn't it?
100%. And I think this is where I've worked for a number of cage diving operations, and every single operation that I've worked with, including Rob and the rest of them, they've all been extremely willing to let me bring my friends out who were initially totally against cage diving. Oh, you guys, you feeding the sharks. The sharks are following the boats back to past the beaches. And then I say to them, look, have you ever been cage diving? And they're like, no. So I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'll organize a complimentary trip for you. You come out with us, come and see the sharks, and then you can make a judgment. 100% of the time, the guys will come out, they'll see how we operate. They'll see that these sharks are not just automatically attracted to the boats when you put your anchor down. Sometimes you can wait up to 5 or 6 hours. Sometimes you don't even see them. And their whole perspective on the cage diving industry changes.
But where does that come from in the first place then? That I've never understood this, because when we were initially looking for sort of backers and funding for the film we made, we'd approached a couple of surf companies
Yeah,
who initially said yes, and then at some point got spooked and went, actually, we're getting a bit of backlash at just the idea, like internally. So
yeah,
because
yeah,
it involves cage diving. Well, once people realized what we were making was actually pro cage diving and pro ecotourism, people like shot off the scene. We can't get involved with that, and they were very nice about saying it, but it was
yeah,
it was obviously a case of they were getting pressure from somewhere to not get involved there.
yeah.
But I mean, where's that come from
Well,
surfers?
yeah, I think particularly
Some surfers, I should add, not all surfers.
some surfers. Yeah, I mean, I still have some very vocal friends when it comes to cage diving who are totally against it. And they're not scared to voice their opinions. Um,
Oh, they must have loved you out in the lineup then, yeah.
I just tend to say it as it is. And I think, majority of the time, these guys who are commenting have actually been in the water and sharks have actually come past and the shark alarm's gone off and they've actually, gone in and been totally fine. It's all within reason. I can understand where they're coming from, but then I also try and get my point across just to try and explain to them, what we're actually doing. But when it comes down to surf industry, you're looking at the major surf companies. I'm not going to name any of them, but they've got sponsored riders, they've got sponsored athletes. Most of the time, their athletes potentially might be against the cage diving. So if they see that their sponsored company is now sponsoring a cage diving or a documentary that's involving cage diving, they might decide, well, geez, I don't want to be interested in a company that's supporting these sort of things. So I think it more comes down to to the bottom line. I think it all comes down to their figures, at the end of the day.
But for the surfers in the water, though, is it that cage diving operations, they think, are potentially going to do something that then will lead to them being harmed in the water? Or is it a respect for the animal? Or is it leave the ocean alone? I'm not asking you to speak for all surfers, obviously, but you have been in that lifestyle and been an avid surfer for so long.
Yeah, I mean, I think most majority of surfers nowadays, like I said, understand the inherent dangers. But what they don't agree with, and once again, it comes down to their perspective of cage diving, is that they think that the cage diving operations are going out there, they're feeding these sharks. That's what they're saying they don't like
Why?
because they say that shark diving boats are associating humans with food. In turn, these sharks are now coming to, say, Cork Bay Harbor, where there's, the fishermen are cleaning their fish in the harbor and the fish is being thrown into the harbor. They're saying that these sharks are following the boats back from Seal Island to Cork Bay Harbor, which is not the case. There's no ways a white shark can maintain swimming at 28 knots for a period of 8 or 10 miles.
Yeah.
But that just comes down to being uneducated and not actually being or going on a shark diving boat before making your comments.
That they think that will then lead to an increase in like negative shark incidents because they're going to come to closer to the shores and start having a investigatory chomp on people.
Exactly, 100%. But then I think, they don't actually understand the movement patterns of these great whites. So, for instance, in False Bay, through wintertime, the white sharks start to arrive to Seal Island. I'd probably say late January, February. They start appearing in small numbers. And then your high season around Seal Island, where there's generally a big congregation of white sharks, is sort of May, June, July, August, where the sharks purely come there to hunt seals. They fatten up because the seals are nice and blubby, and then they move off again. And then they potentially might be back at the end of the season. But what
Yeah.
happens in the summertime, the seals are generally pupping and mating. There's very limited food source for these animals around sea colony. So what these sharks do, they're moving inshore and they're going to go and feed off other shark species, smooth iron shark. They're going to go and feed off yellowtail, which is a very, very healthy, good food source for them. That is directly off where these surfers are surfing. So it's not that the cage diving boats are bringing these sharks to the shore. It's their natural migration pattern, which they've been doing for hundreds of years.
If that argument about them following the fishing boats and the cage diving boats back to the harbour, that harbour in False Bay would just be full all the time. And you don't see that. I mean, it's very rare, from what I understand, that I've ever seen documented is a great white shark anywhere in the harbour in False Bay.
I,
Very rare.
I've never ever heard of a great white shark swimming in those harbors in Cork Bay.
I've seen one set of pictures that, if I can find them, I'll post on under this on the group, and it goes way, way, way back. I think it was something like 2007 or something. There was one shark in the harbour, and it was like that's the only time I've ever heard heard of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of seals being predated on outside of Cork Bay Harbour. There's a very shallow pinnacle where the seals tend to congregate and play in the waves. But either side of that, it's a very very sudden drop off. So I think it could potentially go from sort of maybe 1 meter and it drops off maybe down to 8 or 10 meters. So it's very similar to the what we dub the launch pad at Seal Island,
Yeah.
where a lot of predatory events happen between the Cape Fur seals and the great whites, is where these seals they sort of drift into deeper water, which now the sharks are there. They know that that's prime hunting area for them. That's exactly what happened at Cork Bay, and that was a really really big bull seal which got taken. And he was upwards of 400 kilos.
Wow.
Yeah, big animal,
I've seen those guys sat around. They are beasts.
big
They are
big
massive.
big animals. Yeah.
And then you think about the big animal that takes them out, and that must be a really big animal.
Well, these sharks, these white sharks, they're born at I think maybe 1.5 to 1.8 meters, and they won't start feeding on seals straight away. But maybe when they sort of hit that 2 meter mark, just over 2 meters, they'll start trying to attempt to take seals.
Yeah.
Their teeth are, jeez, I've never felt anything so sharp in my life. We had one tooth which the shark actually bit onto a sort of a floating buoy, which was just randomly floating in the ocean. We were actually coming up to pick up.
All right.
He bit on this buoy, and he actually left a tooth in the buoy, which was extremely lucky.
Well, yeah. I mean, not many people will get to see that.
Exactly, exactly. And we felt the serrations on the side of these teeth, and it wasn't a big tooth. It was very, very, very sharp. And it shows
Wow.
you how you can see these predations which go on, and it won't take a big animal to take down these seals.
When you see obviously like a seal get predated on, and the whole sort of chase starts if the shark hasn't taken it out straight away, and then you see some of the lacerations and some of the wounds on these seals, and you think, how the heck are you guys like still swimming and doing this chase with that? I mean,
Yeah,
I guess
yeah.
just the sheer size of again like some of these seals, but again, I think from what I observed and from what you guys and Rob ever educated me on is,
Mm.
these sharks are smart. The sharks aren't going to go. Usually for those big seals, for those huge seals, they're going to pick off the stragglers. They're going to pick off the sick ones. They're going to be very selective about how they hunt. Is that fair to say?
100%. You hit the nail on the head. These sharks are opportunistic animals, and they know that if they lose their eyes, for instance, that they lose the ability to hunt, and more than likely that shark's going to end up dying, because if a shark can't eat, he's losing energy, and he's just going to he'll unfortunately die. So they tend to not go for the bigger seals, because these seals, they tend to bite them on the nose of the sharks. Seals have actually got claws as well. They tend to go for, like you said, the stragglers, the ones which, for instance, if a group's leaving, you get the smaller ones trying to go with slightly bigger seals. They can't keep up with them. They tend to fall off the back. And those are the ones which the sharks are going to target. And it's normally what we will call sort of young of the year seals. So sort of 3 months to a year, really, really young seals, inexperienced. They don't know the area. They swim out into deep water, not knowing that these sharks are here. And 9 out of 10 times, the seals which get taken are young of the year seals. I don't think I've ever actually seen a big bull seal being predated on at Seal Island. I might have seen an attempt on a group of fairly biggish seals.
Yeah.
They're super clever. What they would do is, if a shark had to predate through an LD sort of group of seals, those seals would stop straight away,
Yeah.
and they would follow the shark, and they'd actually jump onto the shark's tail, which actually makes it a lot more difficult for the shark to turn and try and catch them. And they'll just do that constantly until the shark sort of loses interest, or he gets tired, and then he gives up the chase. Whereas the smaller ones would tend to just disperse and run for their lives. And that's when it's an easy target for the shark to just follow him on the bottom, and then just come from there. And they do that Polaris breach where they come straight from the bottom,
Yeah.
30 miles an hour, and they hit that seal, and it's just it's probably one of the most spectacular things to see from someone who's photographing these events. But at the same time, you have to feel for that little guy. He knows what's chasing him.
It's funny, isn't it? Because obviously you see that straggler shark and you see all the cameras suddenly point to it, and
Yeah.
there's part of your mind while you've got your viewfinder pointing at this thing that says, on the one hand, come on, shark, take this guy, I want to see this, but on the other hand, it's kind of like, this is really sadistic.
Yeah.
We've got like five guys here all pointing their lenses at this poor little guy, but hey, it's nature.
That's exactly it. It's totally it's totally nature. As hard as it is to watch, sometimes, I've seen one seal, and this will stick in my mind for a long time. We had the
Yeah,
seal got predated on by three different great whites coming in from maybe a mile and a half away from Seal Island.
yeah,
He escaped three attempts, literally 5 meters from the island. He was really tired, which actually makes it a lot more difficult for the shark to turn, and try and catch them. And they'll just do that constantly until the shark sort of loses interest or he gets tired, and then he gives up the chase. Whereas the smaller ones would tend to just disperse and run for their lives. And that's when it's an easy target for the shark to just follow him on the bottom and then just come from then, and they do that Polaris breach where they come straight from the bottom
yeah.
30 miles an hour, and they hit that seal, and it's just it's probably one of the most spectacular things to see from someone who's photographing these events. But at the same time, you have to feel for that little guy. He knows what's chasing him.
It's funny, isn't it? Because obviously you see that straggler shark and you see, all the cameras suddenly point to it. And there's
Yeah.
part of your mind while you've got your viewfinder pointing at this thing that says, on the one hand, come on, shark, take this guy, I want to see this. But on the other hand, it's kind of like, this is really sadistic.
Yeah.
We've got like five guys here all pointing their lenses at this poor little guy, but hey, it's nature.
That's exactly it. It's totally nature. As hard as it is to watch, sometimes, I've seen one seal, and this will stick in my mind for a long time. We had the seal got predated on by three different great whites
Oh,
coming in from maybe a mile and a half away from Seal Island. He escaped three attempts, literally 5 meters from the island. He was really tired. He was just, swimming on the surface. Generally, the seals would swim on the bottom for the last, I would say, 80 to 100 meters, because that's the most critical area for them. And for them, being on the bottom is the most safest area. And this little guy was just really tired. And the fourth white shark had to go at him, and it was literally just one full vertical breach, mouth open. There was no chase after it. It was one bite, gone, finished.
oh man.
So like that was probably the saddest moment for me, to see a seal not make it after so many like attempts, and he got away. Unfortunately, at the last little leg, he succumbed.
He gets it. We saw one once that was, obviously the first strike had not hit the seal. I think it had cut it slightly, and this chase went on for like 25 minutes.
Wow.
The shark was exhausted, clearly.
Wow.
And this poor seal, he's doing everything. He's flipping in and out of the water. He's going to the back. He's trying anything. He's coming around the boat, anything to just sort of like, get out of the way, stay safe.
Yeah.
And then eventually the shark gave up, just exhausted. And we
Yeah.
watched this little guy with his cut swim. By that time, cameras went off. It's like, oh, end of the game.
Sure.
And the poor little guy got all the way back just towards the island.
Mm.
And then, yeah, and then along comes another one and just pops him out of the water and just takes him. And it's like, oh man, that guy put such a fight up. It's hard. It is hard to watch. It is hard to watch.
Yeah. And it's hard not to root for the seal sometimes.
Yeah, I think once you've kind of seen the shark and you've seen the breach, which can change your life, absolutely, just change your perspective on the animal and the water. Just a phenomenal sight. But once you've seen that, yeah, there's a part of you that probably thinks, okay, well, I've seen what I needed to see. I don't need to see this seal get bitten in half.
Yeah.
I don't need to witness that. But
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of false bear, one thing, I mean, it's a bit of an elephant in the room at the moment, but I know people are interested about. Just the whole thing of the sharks, white sharks not being around in False Bay. I mean, there was a possible report that while we were on lockdown, I think there was a couple of reports somebody did see some sharks, but no one's been out there to sort of check that out. That have you got any thoughts about that whole situation? Whether it's the orcas, water quality, this fishing of other shark species causing issues? Have you any thoughts from what you've seen on it?
No, Ricardo, 100%. When it comes to the disappearance of the white sharks in False Bay, um, since 2011, we've started seeing a definite increase in the presence of various pods of orcas in False Bay. Now, we're not sure if it's due to the sardine run, where these animals are sort of moving up the east coast following the sardines, but they're coming into False Bay because obviously the dolphins are moving up the coast, and these orcas tend to hunt the dolphins as well. So we've definitely seen a big increase in orca populations, orca pods. And there's not just one pod, there's a couple of pods of sort of 3 to 6 animals in a pod. But I also think that the other contributing factor to the lack of white sharks in False Bay definitely comes down to the overfishing of one of the white shark's sort of primary food sources, which is the smoothhound shark.
Hmm.
Now, this is a commercially acceptable fishery, and what's actually happening? There's a market for Australia. These sharks are being sold in fish shops as flake and chips.
Yeah,
So these sharks are being fished in South Africa, and they're being exported out to Australia and sold in Australian shops. And this is definitely played into the negative presence of white sharks, because these white sharks used to feed on these smoothhounds. And now, obviously, not many smoothhounds being caught, overfishing. These white sharks have now decided that, well, there's no food for us during summer months, or even in the winter. We're moving off and we're going to go and find food source somewhere else.
sure.
There's a few contributing factors, but I definitely think that the orcas and the overfishing of smoothhound shark are two of the main contributing factors.
It would make sense, definitely. There's something more to it. The amount of lack of understanding that when especially in the UK, when you go and buy your fish and chips and you're eating some of these things that you're looking up on the board and seeing the rock salmon and things like that, you're eating sharks
Yeah,
generally. And yeah, I think there's a lot more education needed around that. A lady called Lou Ruddle, who did Fin Fighters operation here in the UK, launched a fantastic campaign. So maybe we'll try and catch up with her at some point. Yeah,
it's one of those interesting sort of points, and that keeps the scientists busy trying to find out exactly what's ticking. But people like Alison Towner, based out in Gansbaai, she does a brilliant job out there sort of monitoring the orca populations and also the predations on white sharks by the orcas. There's been a number of white sharks which have washed up on Gansbaai beaches, all with their livers removed, and all pretty much with identical bite marks, sort of just back of the mouth, below the gills, and
yeah.
just the liver's been taken out.
There has to be a factor somewhere. White sharks being as cautious as they are,
Yeah,
whether it's a couple of orcas in the area, whether it's the overfishing, it's the same thing as when the oil search boat rocked up and those sharks went, nope, out of here, and off they go.
100%. And nobody actually knows what these white sharks are letting off in the water, because they all seem to disappear more or less at the same time over 2 days or so, 1 or 2 days after orcas or a negative presence has come into the area. It's almost
Yeah.
like they let off like a global sign to each other, like, guys, it's time to run.
It clearly happens, it clearly happens that they all get word somehow, which is fascinating. Just shows you how little we understand about them. They clearly all go at the same time. So
Yeah, the predation between an orca and white shark is nature. That must take its path. But I do seriously hope that something can be done about the overfishing of smoothhound shark, which definitely needs to be stopped. And I think if that stops, and we're able to sort of bring that population back up, hopefully we'll see a return of the white sharks to False Bay.
I want to ask you something you just mentioned there. Firstly, obviously, you said about potentially like surfers and with it being mistaken identity. But by the same account, when you say obviously you've seen one have a go at a plastic or a buoy floating in the water, I've seen them breach on kelp, pieces of wood, half a penguin. Do you genuinely think it is mistaken identity, or is it just they will try and investigate anything and everything, and sometimes it just happens to be, a surfer with his arms and legs over the board?
I would say it's a mixture of both mistaken identity and curiosity as to what is that thing floating on the surface. Humans have hands where they can use a knife and fork, to cut your food, or to break things up.
Yeah.
Sharks, they don't have hands; they have teeth, and that's the only way that they can test to see what that particular object on the surface is. Most times, humans will survive it, but every now and then you do get sharks which would actually go into sort of a like an attack mode, and come up at speed and just give it all they've got in that one bite. And unfortunately, that one bite can be the one which causes you to more than likely to bleed out.
Well, this is why I asked, because I would have thought from like a mistaken identity of shark sees surfer arms and legs over the board and says, "Hey, there's a seal," or "Hey, there's a turtle."
Yeah,
I just would have expected to see a more sort of prolific amount of what we would describe as an attack rather than an investigatory bite. Because if a great white shark sees a surfer and thinks, "Hey, look, it's a seal,"
yeah.
surely they're going to have more of a go than what we actually tend to see, which is a bit of a bite and and an artery's kind of been cut, or a foot's been damaged or something. Would we not see it a bit more intense if it really thought you were a seal?
Oh no, 100%. I think I think it goes back to my earlier statement that if sharks, if humans were on the white shark's diet, that there would be shark attacks happening. I would say almost on a daily basis along the Cape Town coast.
Yeah.
But also these sharks they're very in tune when it comes to noises and splashing. And I go back to an incident which happened in 2006. He's actually a very, very good friend of mine, a guy by the name of Ahmad Hassim. I did life saving with Ahmad for many years, and he was actually him and his brother were actually doing a life saving. They were training in False Bay Life Saving Club off Musenberg. The two of them were in the water, maybe I'd say 15 meters apart, and they were doing inflatable rubber duck training. Ahmad was sort of in the water. He was the one that was going to be picked up, and his brother was in the water, and he saw the shark. Ahmad saw the shark going for his brother, and what Ahmad started doing was started splashing on the water, making like big splashing noises.
Right.
And the shark actually turned from his brother and went for Ahmad, and actually bit Ahmad on the ankle. It was actually very, very lucky that during this happened, the ILB, the rubber duck, just got there in time. And it was sort of like a tug of war where the ILB driver was trying to pull Ahmad onto the boat and the shark was hanging onto his ankle at the bottom. He ended up losing his whole ankle. It just shows you that if a shark is zoned in on a particular item and something else happens not far away, they can change their sort of direction and interest extremely quickly.
Even the big guys, even like, a 5.5 meter, great white with girth. I've seen them just like turn on a dime and shoot the other way.
Yeah,
It's that speed along with the size that I think, well, maybe that's where some of the fear comes from as well when you see videos of that kind of thing.
I've seen big sharks in the boats. I wouldn't say you don't actually realize the true size of it until I saw my first great white outside of the water. And this, unfortunately, was in 2012. We had a great white which got caught in a whelk fishing net or fish hook.
Yeah.
And I heard about this, and I quickly got in my car and I drove through Simonstown Harbor. We actually managed to see them sort of taking the shark out the water. And the shark was 4.3 meters in length, but the girth was just over 3 meters. It's a massive animal at 4.3 meters. That it just makes you realize how big and how powerful these animals are.
I'll put a link. I'll actually put that picture on the post here. If you're on the Facebook group where you've come for this, or on the White Shark Interest group, I'll actually put that picture there because Brandon did take. I'd hate to say, you did take a fantastic photograph of it because it's such a horrible sight to see.
Yeah.
So it's not that the sight is fantastic, but again, I guess just the opportunity to have, tragic as it is, to see, like you say, the size and the girth of that creature.
100%. I mean, I would also say that for me it was quite educational, because I could actually then physically see, the ampulla lorenzini. I could see the close up of exactly what the dorsifin looked like, the eyes, the actual coloration of the eyes, the jaw, the teeth, all these things which I've never managed to see while seeing them sort of from the boat looking through the water. I managed to now see firsthand up close. And in turn, I was able to sort of pass that information on to my fellow guests. When I was back on the shark diving boat, I could tell them exactly what the ampulla lorenzini looked like, what the exact coloration of the eyes.
Yeah.
So it was, for me, it was sad, but also very educating at the same time.
Have you seen other incidents while surfing? So I want to ask you about kayaking in a minute, but surfing in particular, have you or have any of your sort of surf buddies had other kind of experiences?
Yeah, yeah. I've had a few friends who have had close brushes with great whites. I think I'd probably say 9 out of 10 times it comes from that very secluded surf spot which I told you about, which was the dunes.
Yeah.
I'll just give you a bit of an idea of the topography at dunes. Is it's a very very shallow sandbank, and then it drops off very quickly into deep water. You've got these sharks using that area as their migration sort of their patterns, their hunting grounds, their feeding areas. They're looking for fish. They sort of on that drop off area. Got a very, very good friend of mine, a water photographer, a guy by the name of Alan van Geesen, who shoots who photographs surfers from the water. And he's actually had an incident where he was in the water and the shark actually brushed right up against his leg.
Wow.
And he turned around and he said all you could see was this massive gray shape in the water. He was super fearful of it. Obviously, he's had it happen to him a few times, and he knows, just remain calm and don't make big splashing noises. And he should have just sat there quietly, calm, slowly started kicking his flippers and heading to shore, just letting the other guys know. But even at Fishook Beach, I've had instances of guys who have been training on their like paddle boards, and in shallow water, they've had 3.5-4 meter great whites just casually swim straight under their boards.
Yep.
Showing no sort of interest in them, but just, I'd say, obviously maybe come up to have a look at them potentially, but just swim directly and then just move off.
Because you were involved, I remember, in IDing a shark that had been photographed below someone's board.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
This was when, the shark spotting program had literally just started. That we had the fishermen on Fishook Mountain. They were spotting for their sort of fishing crews on the beach when the yellowtail used to come into the bay. They would row their boats out and catch the fish. But what we started doing was we gave the fishermen a radio, and we had our own radio. And as soon as they spotted a shark, they would let us know, and we would go out and clear the water, and then we would go out with a rubber duck and just see in the area where the shark was. And it's all very, very much early days when people were still trying to understand, how these sharks were moving, how often they were coming in, what track across the beach they were taking. And the one day I actually went out on the rubber duck on this particular day, and I had I had a little water camera with me, and I stuck my camera under the water, and we photographed these sharks from underneath the water.
Yeah.
These were big animals. Like our rubber duck is 4.2 meters long, and I wouldn't say that it's as big as a rubber duck, but I'll probably say it's 3.5 meters long. Even though you're on a little inflatable, you feel a little bit vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, I bet.
It eventually got stopped that we were no longer allowed to go out and, ID these animals at the time, because, you're in a rubber duck, you've got no propeller guard at the back, and the danger to inflict harm on these animals is quite big, because all it needs is that shark to take one wrong turn and it can get cut by the prop guard. So what we decided to do was just let the animal take its course. And then the fishing spot on the mountain would actually, he started like an ID sort of sheet. He would draw a picture of the shark's movement.
Yeah.
Alison Koch, one of the researchers at the time who was studying these great whites, could actually get a good movement pattern on exactly where the sharks were entering the bay, where they were exiting the bay, how much time they were spending in the bay, the approximate size of the animal. So much research came out of a collaboration between the fishermen and the lifeguards, which we were able to pass onto Alison, and she used that in her data for a PhD, I think, if I'm correct.
And that is a perfect example of what on the last episode of the show. The last episode was about fishing and aquariums and so on. And Melissa Michelson, one of our admins, said that fishing, particularly fishermen, do get a lot of flack on our group sometimes, because people think that fishing just means killing sharks, which is 100% obviously not true in any way, shape, or form. But she said in the early days, so much of what we now look at as shark research and shark conservation efforts was actually driven and contributed to by fishermen, because they're out on the water, they know the animals,
100%. There was actually a really good example of education between fishermen and cage dive operators. One of the other cage dive operators from Seal Island, Chris Fellows, he became very, very good friends, or should I say he befriended one of the per se netters who used to, or he still does today, catch fish off the beach directly north of Seal Island. at a place called Strandfontein. This particular area is very common for bronze whaler sharks to be swimming in summertime. And a lot of the time, these fishermen would catch these bronze whalers in their nets. And in the early days, these fishermen were actually taking these sharks, and selling them and things like that. And Chris Fellows actually went down there and started educating the guy, saying, look, these sharks are actually valuable to our oceans. They
Yeah.
they help control certain fish stocks and things like that. And now they actually release every single shark which has been sort of caught in the net.
Which again just backs up the power of dialogue and having a conversation on these things and not instantly vilifying someone just because, they're a fisherman or just because they ever once happened to have caught a shark. It can happen. So it's education and conversation. That education and that dialogue, if someone like yourself in the area, surfer, cage diving operator, whoever it is, starts seeing fishermen catching sharks, you can try and shut them down and you can try and vilify them, or you can go and have a conversation with them.
Exactly. That's exactly it. I think it comes down to education at the end of the day. If you're able to speak to them on a personal level and try and understand, I suppose, where they're coming from and try and get your point across, most of the time I think they'll understand that, and they'll come to realize that sharks play an extremely important part of our oceans. It's really good to see that individuals are taking the time out to look at shark education and conservation and get involved. They're slowly but surely starting to realize how important it is for these animals to be swimming in the oceans and not end up on a plate in a bowl of soup.
Sure. Tell me from a surfing point of view, if you're out there in the water and there's a shark around you,
Mm.
from your experience from both life saving and surfing and being on boats and observing the behavior and so on, what do you think is the right course of action to take if you see that? Because as knowledgeable as you are, you're still going to have a little bit of a panic moment, surely.
I'll go back to my very first interaction with the great white shark in False Bay outside of a cage. It was the 9th of September 2002, and I was actually kayaking on my surf ski out towards Roman Rock Lighthouse.
Yeah.
And it was a very, very light southeasterly wind. We were paddling into the wind, and I actually had a great white come up and what I would like to think would be at the last minute realize that is not what he's after, and he sort of backed out. So he hit me at the back of my kayak, which knocked me out.
Yeah.
He then swam around the kayak 2 or 3 times, and then he sort of did this vertical dive. So as he turned, I think it was all in panic mode for the shark as well, because what actually happened, he swam around the front, and his caudal fin actually knocked the front of my kayak, which gave him quite a big fright. And the whole caudal fin came out the water, and he dived directly underneath me. What gave it away for me is I looked at the top of the caudal on the great white. You get that small sort of arch, sort of indentation at the top of the caudal fin.
Yep.
I knew straight away it was a shark. But everything happened so quickly.
Yeah.
I got into my kayak and I just started paddling, splashing, which was probably totally the wrong thing to do. And in today's times, they just say, you need to remain calm. It's hard to remain calm when an incident like that has just happened. A couple of years later on, I was doing the same paddle, but this time I was coming from Miller's Point, and I just entered into Fishhook Bay, and it was dead flat water.
Yeah.
And I literally paddled straight over the shark. Like I literally split him straight in half. All I did was I just carried on paddling, but trying to make as minimal splash as possible. And that shark actually didn't even turn on me. That shark just carried on its path, on its track towards the catwalk, which is exactly the same path which the sharks are generally taking to this day.
Yeah.
They enter Fishhook from either sort of Cork Bay. They make their track directly across Fishhook Bay towards the catwalk, and then they go back out along the catwalk towards Simonstown. Even in today's times, if I'm in the water and I know someone's seen a shark, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to paddle probably to the nearest person I can see, because if you've got a big sort of group of people, safety numbers, big bulky area, and the shark's not going to go for a big item. They'll go for the individuals,
Yeah.
an individual person who's sort of segregated from a group or who's alone. So I would try and get everybody to come together and ideally sort of just stay calm as possible and paddle back.
You don't want to be that straggling seal at the back of the pack, do you?
It's very difficult for me to say how I'd react, because everybody reacts differently.
Yeah.
And depending on how you're feeling at the time, depending on the surf location where you're at, is how you're going to, it's going to determine your nature of your reaction.
I guess one of the things is not to try and put yourself in any increased level of risk in the first place. Because I know I've often heard of incidents and even in some cases what you might deem an attack when someone has gone out swimming
Mm,
in a known white shark area
yeah,
at a known white shark hunting time. At say sunrise, and
yeah.
being around, a pack of seals. I guess you can decrease the risk by not putting yourself in that kind of situation in the first place and having the foresight rather than what you do after.
100%. If you can try and minimize the chances by not surfing at sunrise, or not surfing at sunset, then that is the way that you should do things. But being a surfer, sometimes being in the water at sunrise or sunset is the best time to be in the
I
water.
was just gonna say, it's so that's part of what it's about, yeah.
That's exactly it. It's about being in the water at sunrise or sunset. I mean, I was up the coast, actually last year when I was back in South Africa. I was in the water before the sun came up. That was the most surreal experience.
Yeah.
There was no one in the water. I still paddle out because I knew that's what I wanted, and it was just, it was amazing. It was really, really, really special.
Can I ask you about a topic that does come up time to time on the group? And it's quite a controversial one because people have some crazy things that they want to say. When someone has unfortunately died, a
Mhm.
surfer has died, we start seeing comments pop up on the group occasionally. Sometimes these people don't stay on the group very long, who can make really insensitive comments about it afterwards.
Yeah,
A kind of an instant reaction for some people is just maybe a misunderstanding of, well, they knew what they were doing, or will you take that risk? They live in the ocean, not us, and it's their home, so you shouldn't go in it, or you knew the risk when you did go in it, ranging
yeah,
right through to really insensitive comments of saying things like, what's the big problem, he'll have died happy because he's a surfer, what a great way to die, and things like that, which is, to me, is horrendously insensitive to the families and so on. But how does the surfing community tend to react when an incident's happened with a fellow surfer?
every single time there's been a shark attack in Cape Town, immediately fingers are being pointed at the cage diving boats.
Right.
The surfers always point fingers at the cage diving boats, saying that the cage diving boats are conditioning the sharks to assume the boats have food, and that cage diving needs to be banned and stopped. There was a period of time where there was a shark attack happened in False Bay, and the cage diving operations were paused due to pressure from the public, and the Department of Environmental Affairs actually put a pause on cage diving in certain areas,
Yeah.
and it had zero effect. A couple of years later, there was another shark attack, and once again, fingers get pointed at the cage diving boats. But I also like to think that the media tend to blow shark attacks up because it's a massive incident. Teeth and things like that on the front page of a paper are going to attract viewers and readers. And I've had a time where I've actually got interviewed by a paper, and I gave them my honest opinions. What I told them and what was written in the paper the next day was totally opposite.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me at all.
They basically spun the story totally the other way. And I actually, I did take it up with them, but what do they do? They say, "I know we apologize," but the story's already been put out there.
Yep.
Individuals and surfers, they are sympathetic, 100%, but we all understand at the end of the day that there are inherent dangers. But I've never experienced where fellow friends of mine who have been attacked, and then you get vile comments from lobby groups or things like that.
I suppose it depends who's involved with it, and like you say, how much it's been blown out of proportion.
Yeah,
I've noticed a far different reaction when from headlines and so on. Like we were talking earlier about the Mick Fanning
yeah,
incident.
yeah,
The way that report was reported, if that hadn't been a surfer, high profile surfer in a competition and like live on TV and so on, then if it was just Joe Bloggs on the street who was out surfing and that happened to, it would have been reported with ridiculous sensation. How it went to attack him, it stalked him, it went for him. Because of the outcome and because of how it was viewed and because it's high profile surfing. It was almost like played. I wouldn't say jovial, but it was like, hey, crazy man punches shark. And it was all done a little bit sort of lighter reporting than the scaremongering.
yeah, yeah,
And I think that was purely because of the situation.
yeah,
The guy stayed calm. He did what he needed to do. It was live on TV. It was such a rare thing to actually see on live TV. And it's a surfer. It's suddenly not this like, well, no one saw it,
yeah,
so we'll just write whatever the hell we want.
yeah.
Which is, shark attacks, man, shark stalks. And stalking is a word I hear all the time.
Yeah, Yeah.
stalking the boats. It's like it's not. It's swimming.
There's a lot of good which came out of that incident with old Mick Fanning. He was quite sort of shaken up after the whole incident.
Yeah.
But what he's actually gone into now, he's since then retired, but now he's actually involved in shark conservation himself.
Yep.
He's been in a couple of sort of conservation documentaries, which is really good. He's giving back to what sort of has given him a career and a lifestyle in terms of surfing and being in the ocean. He wants to now sort of give back and educate people that these sharks are not man eaters, that they're out there just doing their thing. Like you said, they're just swimming around. And he was just, I would say, in the wrong place at the wrong time, which majority of the people are when they get attacked by a shark.
Yeah, yeah, it's circumstance, it's not that anybody's done anything wrong, which again is why I don't understand the comments about, well, you get in the ocean, you take the risk. Well, you get in your car, you take a risk.
Yeah, yeah,
You got to work, you take a risk. There's not really any difference there. What I did think was really interesting there is every time an incident happens, it's exactly what you just said. If ever I've seen a surfer who's been bitten and survived, or anybody who's been bitten and survived, or people whose family members who've had someone tragically die, 99.9% of the time, all I ever see is the positive message after. Don't blame the shark. It's just happened. It's tragic, but it's just happened.
yeah.
Don't blame the shark. Don't go hunting. Don't go sending Quint and his boys out on the boats with dynamite like in Jaws, to go get this beast. I really do think that mentality has changed, because I'm sure there would have been a time it would have been surfer gets attacked by a shark, quick, rally the pitchforks and let's go out there and get this creature.
Yeah.
Some people still think like that, but I really do think that's changed and I think it's that kind of education that you're talking about.
I don't think I can remember, like you said, I think I can remember, even with all the shark attacks which have happened over in Australia on the west coast over the last few years, that the families have ever been negative to. They've all come out and said, it was an isolated incident, unfortunate that it happened. There's no cause for going out killing the sharks. It comes down to the press again. The press are the ones which are blowing the situation up, which in turn have caused the Western, Australian government to, introduce drum lines,
Yeah.
try and catch these animals. Taking out one or two sharks from a specific area is going to change nothing, because these sharks are moving massive distances. They're not resident to any area.
Yeah.
So taking out one or two sharks in an area is doing nothing.
Just the mentality is it. But you're right. The media is the fit. It'd be nice when you get these incidents happening that last paragraph somewhere buried very deep down that the average Joe's not reading, where the family did say this is just what he loved doing and it's just nature and you cannot blame the shark. Kind of bump that up in the narrative somewhere a little bit more the top.
Yeah.
I think it's a hard push to actually get most media to turn around and actually report it in any other kind of way than clickbait and the drama and the headlines. But if we can at least get that positive attitude of what's happened and the educational side of it bumped up a little bit in the reports, would be good. But that's where folks like yourself and a lot of members of our group and what we do, I guess that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, education is key, I think, to success of the ocean and its animals which live in it.
Well, I hate to say it, Brandon, but we are just about out of time. This is probably going to be our longest podcast yet, which is exactly why I wanted you on the show, because we've got a lot to talk about. And I cannot thank you enough for your time today. I think some amazing insights there into shark behavior and surfing mentality and so on. So thank you so much for coming on.
No, Ricardo, thank you very much, and thanks to all the members of the white shark industry for listening to this podcast. It's been a real pleasure. And those of you who haven't been cage diving or been in the water with great white sharks or sharks in general, I think it's definitely something that should be put on your bucket list. So go out there, start saving those pennies, and let's save and conserve and protect.
Thanks so much for coming on, man. If anybody, just check the links below on the group, or if you're not a member, as I said, do join the group. I'll obviously put some of Brandon's photography and work under there as well. You check that out, because I would love to have you back on and talk about that. I mean, photography alone, you've taken some fantastic images. So if you'd like to come back and talk about that and other topics someday, I would love to have you back on.
Definitely, I'd love to share my knowledge and experience from working at Seal Island. I think I've done, like I said, 9 seasons. So slowly but surely managed to acquire the skills and managed to capture some really, really special images and memories over the years. And I'd love to share that with the rest of the members.
We'd love to see it. So just as I say, anybody who's not a member already, White Shark Interest Group. We are the largest White Shark specific group on Facebook. You can find us on Facebook. Just search White Shark Interest Group. You can also check us out on Instagram at White Shark_interest group, where we don't just post images, and I will put some of Brandon's images on there, but we also put a little bit of knowledge and facts behind those images as well. You can check us out on YouTube. That might be where you're listening to this podcast right now. Just search White Shark Interest Group YouTube, and our website at whitesharkinterestgroup.com. Have I said White Shark Interest Group enough times? Without further ado, thanks once again to Brandon. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
And we will see you guys on the next episode.